Hey, Full Metal family, wanted to film this quick little disclaimer before rolling this next video. Shortly after filming it, I found myself in not so great of a place. I was terminally online. I was really stressed out, reading bad news after bad news, not really happy with the state of things today or what they might look like tomorrow. And I sat like that for about a day. I let myself sort of sit in it. Couldn't really sleep. Didn't function the best in my 9 to 5. And then I had to pull myself out. I took a step back, spent some time with friends and family, just doing stupid shit, just having fun, not caring about, however crazy things may seem in the world. And then yesterday, I shot some trash, ran some drills, and was ready to get back into it. So that's why this episode is a little bit delayed. But I wanted to film this before and share that with you because my goal in this, in starting all of this, and in life really, is to join the voices that are using the internet for good to promote happy and healthy lifestyles, really. And also to share news and an angle of the news, maybe, that you cannot access through the normal channels of media. It is not, my purpose is not to gaslight you. It is not to keep you outraged like the current news media, to keep you coming back. I have no interest in that. I'm not happy doing that. That's why I had to take a step back. I had to realize that I was sort of spiraling myself. So you're going to realize I get a little fired up. I get a little heated in this, and I debated deleting it because it's a very short video and refilming it. But it is genuine. It comes from the heart. And even though I walked away spiraling myself, the message isn't one to spiral. It is a constructive message, I do believe. It's a valuable message, I do believe. But I wanted to do this ahead of time and share this as I'm now rewatching it, as I'm editing it, because I don't want anyone, or I want to help, anyone avoid falling into the same pitfall that I did. And maybe if you start to feel yourself going down that pitfall, you might be able to recognize it quicker now if I'm calling it out ahead of time. So, as always, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. Many of you have actually recently. I've been seeing a lot more engagement on Instagram, which is super cool because I've been shadow banned so many times. But you guys' DMs are great. Love interacting. Love hearing the feedback even you guys have and the questions. Like, it's all very valuable as I work to grow. And that sort of organic interaction is huge. It's critical for such a young, brand, a young channel like this. So continue to reach out, continue asking questions, and continue getting active. You may find that a takeaway from this video. But as always, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. It is, of course, required of man that he should benefit his fellow men, many if he can, if not a few, if not a few, those who are nearest, if not there, himself. For when he renders himself useful to others, he engages in public affairs. Seneca. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast. I am your host, Moores Walker, and as always, I want to thank you for taking the valuable time out of your day to consume the content I create. But jumping right into it, for those observant listeners out there, you may have noticed that this week's quote was not the topic or related to the topic of death, but rather service. I also shared the following quote from Cicero in a prior episode that I will repeat again, given its relevance to the topic at hand today. Since we see that man is designed by nature to safeguard and protect his fellows, it follows from this natural disposition that the wise man should desire to engage in politics and government, and also to live in accordance with nature by taking to himself a wife and desiring to have children with her. I'll do my best not to repeat what was said during the episode on catastrophizing, but there has been a wave of not so great news regarding our natural rights recently. Example 1, a bill proposing a 1,000% tax on high capacity magazines and assault weapons was introduced by Don Bayer of Virginia. And in it, the living embodiment of why we need term limits was even so bold as to include verbiage that explicitly states he does not have to abide by his own rule. Example 2. SCOTUS ruled recently that the ATF can still hold their authority to change the definitions of words in the dictionary, while the Supreme Court itself determines whether that is even legal. 3. Biden has ordered his ATF to publish a rule to eliminate online firearm marketplaces and the private sale of firearms. And the last example I'll give here is the FBI murdered a Utah man, you may have heard, during a visit to his home for his social media posts threatening Biden. However, a scan of the man's history on Facebook reveals he also made threats to the president before Biden, and to no one's surprise, there weren't any house calls from the feds. And if the tumbles, the child sniffing, the McConnell.exe has stopped working, and the ceding of power to a child didn't make it abundantly clear that those in charge are the least fit to serve us, let's look at another example. I want to look at our Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Pete isn't a living testament as to why we need term limits yet, but his resume is still about as worthless as a convicted felon's. Now, during Pete's very short stint as transportation secretary, the following national headline generating issues have occurred. The nuking of Palestine, Ohio, and the experience of flying is now no different than sitting at the DMV. And these are all things we're very much familiar with, either personally or they have certainly flooded our news feeds day in and day out. And if it wasn't enough, if the increased prices, if the long hours and canceled flights wasn't enough to make flying a nightmare, a new report just came out confirming that close calls are even more common than anyone would have ever believed, all under Pete. And in fact, the only way Pete could secure a job would be via a DEI hiring initiative due to his LGBT identity. So, how the fuck was he able to secure a position serving us, and let alone in a position where the consequence for ignorance and ineptitude is human life? But I'm going to take a step back so as to avoid catastrophizing in this case, and it is also not my goal in this particular episode to shed more light on the failings of our representatives. I would be here all night, and in fact, I'd be here until the FBI decided to make another house call. And since I value what's left of my life, I'm going to pause for this episode on that little track. Instead, I intend to use the failings that I've mentioned as examples above, all of which we are familiar with, like I said, as fuel. Fuel to drive us to consider shifting our focus to a battlefield we have abandoned entirely because we simply feel as though we have no hope of ever succeeding on it. This battlefield is politics. The most that the majority of people interact with the system, we'll call it, is voting every presidential election, and that's it. However, there is so much more that can be done at the local level of our communities. Unfortunately, though, these opportunities go largely ignored for either lack of media attention or how convoluted it is to get involved. Regardless of the reason, however, we need to be seeking these chances out within our communities to voice our opinions to our representatives. We need to be appointing those who actually represent us and who are fit for the job, and we need to stay vigilant of new opportunities to stay involved in ways that impact our immediate community. Now, this is because we are affected most by the things carried out by our local reps, and they are the ones who are supposed to go to bat for us on larger stages. It is also much easier to get involved locally. It's much more approachable to get involved locally and make an impact locally than it is at a national level. So go to your local town hall meetings, protest, and exercise your First Amendment rights so that it is known when those who are supposed to serve you step out of line, and coordinate with others around you as a community, since numbers are what really make a difference. And while all of this may feel trivial or maybe even pointless to many listening, I know it did for me. That was the stance I occupied for a very long time. I ask you, what are you doing now? This is the question I had to ask myself. What am I doing when I'm not training? Am I terminally online, or am I bettering my life and the lives of others around me? And for anyone following what's happening in Tennessee, for example, you know how important local representation is. And shout out to T Rex Arms for doing such a tremendous job at staying plugged in and informing the rest of the country on what is happening and how things work at a local level in Tennessee, quite frankly. The SparkNotes version of the Tennessee debate, or the Tennessee drama, if you will, goes something like this. Tennessee is the first battleground that will set the precedent for red flag laws in this country, and really set the precedent for red flag laws, serious red flag laws in the sense of how we understand them to be. And so, after the local shooting that was carried out by the mentally disturbed trans student in Tennessee, the state is now holding this special session in response. And by the way, how typical of the government to tackle something reactively versus proactively and in such a spectacularly terrible way. But what we have seen in this special session has been shocking. It's being used as a platform for Tennessee representatives to record their own sound bites for their next campaigns and fundraisers. And considering the entire purpose for calling this session, I fail to see how that falls short of fraud, negligence, or treason. But we also get a glimpse at who shows up to these sessions at the local level. And this is what I really sort of want to zero on in this whole sort of week's episode. This further highlights the people who are showing up. This further highlights the need for the involvement of good men and women from the actual community. In Tennessee, we are seeing people from outside of the state, and it's primarily people from New York, as observed by T Rex Arms. They said most of the cars in the parking lot had New York plates, which I found very interesting. And people who are either a part of or funded by major political organizations are showing up to protest and make the most noise. And it's all really in an effort to make sure that any effective legislation is railroaded in the name of some agenda. And the best example, the prime example so far that we've seen is that one of the bills that was passed or was allowed to be discussed, or I apologize, I'm not as well versed as the T Rex guys are. We'll say that one of the bills that was passed during this special session allows for off duty law enforcement officers to carry in a school. And I, again, like the T Rex guys, when they were talking about this, I was always under the assumption that they could do this, but in Tennessee, you have to be on duty. Like in uniform, you have to be on duty in order to carry. You are not allowed as an off duty officer to conceal carry or to carry into a school, but this bill would allow them to do so. And this is something that I have gone on the record saying in my video regarding gun control and mass shootings and everything. Statistical gaslighting, I believe, is also what I covered in that episode. But I put myself on record saying that this would indeed make a huge difference, as the logic in target selection for criminals is maximizing carnage slash payout with minimal resistance. This is why thieves break in at night when, people are asleep or away from their homes. Or this is also why they break into cars when they're parked in a structure when no one's there to see and when no one's inside said car. This is also why schools are considered such a prime target for such disturbed individuals. There's nobody present who can offer resistance of any sort, and it is truly a fox in the henhouse situation. Therefore, knowing that there could be or that there is somebody inside of a school who possesses equal or greater force would be a massive deterrent for somebody plotting to carry out a horrific act. And even if this doesn't stop a mentally disturbed individual from choosing a school as a target, that is unfortunate, but it will absolutely reduce the damage said individual will be able to inflict. You are not waiting for law enforcement or equal or greater force of any sort to arrive if somebody is already within the school walls who can provide that force to stop such a monster. Furthermore, if I haven't made my point clear enough, and we really need to drive the point home as I adjust this mask and you get a new one, your money is protected in a vault. It's transported by armed guards. Government officials are also protected by weapons of war, if we really want to go there. And it is a universally accepted fact that your children are more valuable than either of these or anything else in the world for that matter. So, why would you not want where they are sent off every day for most of the day to be fortified and defended? But if you're sensing the tone and where I'm probably going with this, the reaction in the room when this bill was passed in this special session was unanimous outrage. And I'll try to find the clip, but this is because it is not about keeping children alive for these people who are there. These people who are wearing shirts with messaging related to their agenda within the state building here, with Planned Parenthood listed as a sponsor, which, by the way, what are they doing sponsoring these people or sending people to this thing to opine on gun control and mental health? This tells you that they have no innate interest in keeping kids safe or alive. It has nothing to do with this at all. But all of these people all cried out, calling this bill racist and other irrelevant objections. It was is actually laughable. But this is the prime reason. This is another reason why people like us need to be in the room so that their voices are not the only ones. And ideally, they are drowned out entirely and discouraged from ever showing up, very much how we are finding ourselves on the outside. That's what has to happen. And this is just one important example. This is just one topic that we care very much about and can relate to. There are countless other things we can impact for the better. And so if you're like me, perhaps you have given up on voting even. I had, for a while. And it wasn't until listening and reading to, people with different mindsets and really sitting down and thinking about, you know, what I can do, what's the right thing to do, what is the virtuous thing to do, you know, there's probably zero chance you ever would have considered showing up to a special session like this one, or your local town meeting, or your school board meeting. But these and other actions are exactly the things people like us have to be taking part in. This is how we build and better our communities. And just like evolution, assuming no major outside forces are at play, which may very well be wishful thinking in this case, but nonetheless, should our ideas in action yield the positive outcomes that we expect, more people will be attracted to adopt them. But more importantly, I can safely say that not a single one of us has had a real representative. Nobody who has held power has been like us, has acted in our best interest, or has any true qualifying experience that would make anyone comfortable with the amount of power they have. And if you need a recent example to help highlight this, allow me to put this out into the airwaves. Allow me to make my stance very clear on something here. I will not recognize anyone who would fly a Ukraine flag rather than a Hawaiian flag. And let that be another identifier, just like those who cried for mandates and compliance, of those who are the least deserving of power, community, and credibility. None of these individuals represent you or are interested in your well being. You are simply their means of making a living, so strip them of that when you have the opportunity to do so, and recognize that tyrant when you see one. And on that note, I want to conclude with a topic that is gaining momentum, unfortunately. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is the return of mandates and lockdowns ahead of the upcoming election. I have wasted too much breath on this pathetic idea, especially with how shamelessly it is being pushed now. They're not even trying. We in the community have trained for this. We are training for this. We already know the outcome. Stand if you must, even if alone, but you must stand. Remember, the only road out of Lahaina was barricaded by the state. Those good men and women who disobeyed bad laws survived. Their families survived. Do not comply. Go forth, stay metal, and stay alive.